G'day everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of Let's Do Another Take. Apologies that it's been a couple of months since I last uploaded, but I had to move house and consequently reset up my studio. I've moved just down the road in Foster in New South Wales, and it's absolutely stunning here, but still kind of getting everything set up just the way I want it. Today, I'm chatting with the amazing Leigh McRae. Leigh is one of my best mates. He's taught me so much about singing, but also about life in general. Leigh is a friend, a teacher, and a mentor to me, and I'm sure you'll love this chat. We spoke about so many things. We spoke about singing. We spoke about what to do when your voice is fatigued and how to recover properly. We spoke about Leigh's experience being on audition panels for TV shows and should you go on shows like The Voice. And he had some really interesting things to say about that. And we spoke about him visiting the Neverland Ranch where famously Michael Jackson lived, and so much more. So please sit back and relax and enjoy my chat with the absolutely amazing Leigh McRae. My friend, I've got a question for you that is something I've pondered a lot, and that is singing innate, or can you learn to sing?
It's a great question. The answer is yes to both, but I think that singing, to start with, is more environmental, if that's the right way to put it. It's more an exposure thing. So right. You get people that are brought up in and around singing, and there's been a lot of myths about it over the years. Oh, my great-grandmother was a singer, and it's almost like implied that it's genetic in some way. There's no evidence to that, but there's certainly plenty of evidence to support that it's an environmental thing. It's cultural, of course, for a lot of folks, and that as long as it's encouraged, that people tend to develop quite well on their own. In answer to your second part there, yes, singing can be taught insofar as improvement. I certainly lay no claim to talent for people. The talent comes from somewhere that I just don't understand. My mentor, Seth Riggs, who I was with for many, many, many years, used to do this lovely thing. He'd say, God has sprinkled talents all over the world. He used to sing with his hands like this, and he would say, and he would say, it doesn't matter what race, creed, or color they land in. He said that as voice teachers, it's our responsibility to try and enhance that talent and to bring it on. So I've certainly seen people make enormous improvements when they commit to the art form and to the study of singing.
Have you ever worked with someone who just flat out couldn't sing, who became in any way a great singer?
No, I can answer that categorically. I've been pretty fortunate in my life insofar as in 41 years now that I've been doing this, I've only ever seen, excuse me, forgive me for that.
You need to do some vocal warm-ups.
No, I need to not have a head cold would be a good idea. Let me give you that answer again. I'm pretty fortunate that in 41 years, I've seen two people from memory who could not distinguish a note from another note. One of those persons had a mental illness, and like a pretty serious mental illness, and darest I say, may have fallen into the category of being somewhat delusional. And the other person just could not tell the difference. And I mean, I played something 2 octaves apart, and they told me it was the same note. So that person's, but it's interesting because generally speaking, most people would not find a natural bent towards something that they didn't have some sort of affinity with. Like I mean, you and I are avid golfers, right? But I'm not going to play in the British Open. Like, I'm well aware that my skill sets do not go to that. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. So in that regard, I've been pretty lucky. I have heard all sorts of other stories from associates and whatnot, but I've been pretty lucky. I've only seen a couple of people in my life
who were completely kind of tone deaf, for want of a better word.
Just absolutely no idea what they were doing in any way, shape, or form.
And did you work with them for long?
One lesson each, and I was very honest with them. One of the people argued with me vehemently about as to why they thought they were going to be a good singer, and that they had some sort of vision and all the other stuff that went with it. And it's not my job to thwart people's enthusiasm, but I just said to them that I didn't think I was the right person for them. Now, whether that person went on and did something, I've never heard of them again. I think it's probably the safest way to put it, you know.
Yeah. Do you find it hard when you've got to deliver home truths to people?
I used to find it very difficult at one point, but look, just recently, I've got a lovely young guy coming to me who's a fine singer, has produced a track finally after about 6 months or so, and it sounds good and whatnot. And he started asking me about contacts, insofar as record company contacts and whatnot. And I said to him, well, you're not ready yet. And he said, oh, no. And I know as producer, Michael, you hear this as well, but all my friends think this is a great song, right? And I said to him, it is a good song. That's not the issue, though. You're not ready for a career yet, you know? And he got quite upset with me. He wasn't aggressive or anything, but you could see that he was upset. And I said to him, look, you don't get a second chance at making a first impression. So if I was to ring a manager that I know, or I've got a couple of contacts at some record companies, I'm telling you right now, my friend, they're not going to take you on. There are people who have been doing this for years and years and years who they're ready. And so I really feel that I do these people no favors by lying to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just not helping them. I'm not helping them out at all at that point.
Totally.
So you must have a similar thing.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah.
It's all good. Yeah. I mean, it's something that I feel a great responsibility for. You know, it's really important that I tell people, you know, what I think is the truth, and to dissociate between, or to differentiate between what to me might be the truth and what is a subjective truth. You know, there's objectivity and subjectivity.
Well, if I can say one of the many things that I've admired and loved about you over the 25 years plus that we've known each other is I've always got an honest answer from you. And
thank you.
You recall just a couple of years ago, I came to you with concerns about the show I was putting together, and we did the demo with the Henley stuff. And I knew I was going to get an honest answer and an honest result. And for folks who are not looking for that, I kind of categorize them as people that are looking for a more effective way to do nothing. And I can't help them. I can't help them, and you can't help them. And in fact, if I may be so bold, we help them by being honest with them. Not nasty.
Absolutely.
I've never known you to be nasty or rude to anybody, notwithstanding unless they push the point, right, where you maybe have to be a little bit more, dare we say, a little more abrupt. But I say to people, look, you can go elsewhere, and if somebody disagrees with me and they can help you, then you shouldn't be here anyway. You should be with that person. And but I hate to sound smug about this. Rarely, if ever, have I ever heard about those folks again. Yeah.
Well, the problem is they'll probably find someone willing to take their money and piss in their pocket.
Correct. There's no shortage of that. There's no shortage of that seemingly in pretty much any business, and the music business is pretty much up there as well. You know.
Yeah. You were talking before about people that are delusional. And I think back to, when the idol shows were a thing, and they really used to hammer in the audition phases, there'd be the people that everyone would sit back and laugh at.
Yeah.
And I always found that incredibly gross.
Yeah.
And incredibly destructive.
Yep.
You said that you've only worked in your 40-odd years with two people that had zero concept of what the hell was going on. But you must have met a whole bunch of people who are somewhat delusional about their talent.
Yes. Full disclosure here, I've been on the audition panel for quite a few of those shows, and I'll leave which brands of them I'll call out of it for contractual reasons.
Yeah.
But we were seeing people in that regard who were completely delusional. So I know I answered your question earlier. That's my experience. The two people I mentioned, that's personal, one-to-one. But in that environment, I saw dozens of them.
Yeah.
And I saw the way that those people were. There's no other way to put it. They were used as fodder to fill a show. They were used as. At what point, other than if you're a comedian, at what point is that meant to be laughed at? Why are we laughing at the misfortune of people?
I find it very sad, and people are sitting back and laughing at it.
Yeah, look, I've got too many stories. If you'd like me to go, I can tell you one in particular but I'll protect the identity of the young lady because I've written about this in an upcoming book that I'm working on, and nice. I promise that I protect her identity. And anyhow, the short version is that this young lady grew up in the western part of Australia. She was a fine singer. She was very ambitious. She had posted her room, including her ceiling, with posters of Mariah Carey from the time that she was a teenager. And she'd go to bed every night, and literally she told me she had a torch, and she'd look at it, and she would dream about becoming a pop singer.
Yeah.
The circumstances were that in this particular part of the country, the opportunities were not what they are here on the East Coast. You know what I mean? Like in Sydney and Melbourne. So at the age of 16, she convinced her parents to allow her to move to Sydney to stay with an uncle. And the uncle was centrally located and whatnot. It pains me to tell you that during her time of staying with that uncle, certain things happened to this young woman which are unspeakable. Now,
for fuck's sake.
Right. So essentially, and you cut this out if it's not appropriate, of course, but she was in a situation where she wanted to have this career, and she anyhow, I offer no judgment on that in any way, shape, or form, because people might be listening to this and going, well, why didn't she just move? She couldn't. She had no choice in the circumstance. It's very complicated. So she ends up getting a scholarship to the Sydney Conservatorium, of all things, as a classical singer. But she takes it because it's paying for her tuition, and she's moving more towards her goal. She then goes into one of those shows, and I'm not going to name it because it's not their fault what happened to her. But she goes into one of those shows. She puts on her audition form that she has perfect pitch, which she did. She has a 4-octave vocal range, which she did. She's also a very attractive young girl, young woman at this point, and she's very confident with herself. And she goes in and she does her auditions and whatnot. Anyhow, suffice to say, these were the days when they used to put those auditions then on this particular brand of show. They put them on the website so people could, have a look at them. Now, most of your listeners and viewers are going to know that those things are cut up. They're edited. You have no choice in it. You have no control over it.
Yeah.
And she's out the following weekend with some friends in a prominent place in Sydney, and people are pointing at her and laughing at her. And she doesn't understand what's going on. Now, of course, once again, you don't blame the show for this, but this is what the people in those shows don't realise. Well, I'll let people have their own opinion of that. Well, certainly for putting her there to be ridiculed, they are completely responsible.
Absolutely.
But
where's the duty of care for another human being?
Right. I couldn't agree more. But it's interesting that somebody then has the audacity to feel that they have the right to come up to somebody and say, you think you're good and you're hopeless and you're this, that, and the other. Well, suffice to say, not only was that pretty much the end of her on that, but that girl has never sung again. And that happened a long time ago. But I knew this story mainly because I was in contact with the girl. Now, to add insult to injury, if that's the right way to put it, several years later, I was on the audition panel for another show, and I actually overheard one of their producers bragging about that circumstance. And that's a conversation that I had with that guy that cannot go onto this podcast insofar as you can imagine. I ripped into him.
Oh, good on you.
The most polite thing that I said to him is, "You're a disgusting individual." That's the most polite one. In my professional life, I've never, ever walked out of any contract, ever. Whether it's been overseas, that's the first contract I've ever walked out on. And when they threatened to take legal action, I said, that's fine, because one of your rival TV stations would love to know exactly what's gone on here. And they left me alone. I actually have a letter from them which informs me that I'll never work for them again. It's one of the most proud things I've got. In fact, I should frame it here and put it up in the studio. Well, only because you're asking, that's right. But they're awful. Yeah. They're awful people. They are awful people, and
or they're just normal people thrust into an awful fucking business. And
it's under the heading of, we're making television. Look, let's look at it. If to make reference to The Biggest Loser, right? The Biggest Loser people sign a contract that forbids them to be interviewed or to discuss their circumstances for a period of time, and I could be incorrect about this, but I believe it's about 2 years afterwards. Right. Now, how many of those people do you think stay in that body weight? The percentage is less than 2%, is what I've been told. Yeah, and so it's not about health. It's not about anything other than. But I guess this is the society that. Have we always lived in it, Michael, where we're kind of voyeuristic? We've always been, I guess, some seemingly comparative. And it's interesting because as soon as you put somebody in the so-called seat of authority, and especially when they were voting, I don't like that person. But when you take the cross-section of the demographic of people that are voting and you ask them, were you voting about the singing? No, I didn't like the hair. Oh, I didn't like that girl's shoes. Literally, people are doing, potentially deciding the fate of somebody's career because their haircut's not right. And look, we know that to be true. Now, back to the idea of the, quote, singer-artist or whatever, if they don't realise that this is just a stop you get off at, it's not the end. And so right now as we're recording this, I have two people that look like they've come through for the new season of Idol, which is coming. And we've had numerous conversations about what they need to expect. They just have to be informed, and they have to know that the one thing they do control is their performance. They have no control over anything else. If someone cuts a bad angle on them or cuts them, putting their hands on their hips, they could be doing a joke, right? Going, ha, ha, that's funny. If they cut all that stuff together in that way, they have nothing, they can't do anything about it, is what I meant to say. But they do control their concentration and their performance, and that's, well, hopefully that's the thing that gets them across the line. But I'm being a bit naive, of course.
So you must have had hundreds of occasions like this. I've had dozens and dozens where someone has said, I'm thinking I should go on The Voice or Australian Idol or one of those things. What do you reckon? What advice do you give to people that are considering going on one of these shows?
Yeah, well, there are people who are clearly not mature enough to handle it, is the best way to kind of look at it. What they really ought to do with these shows is have an aptitude test more than anything else. Your ability to sing, fine. Your ability to look good on camera, fine. But do you have the emotional intelligence or the emotional fortitude to be able to handle what comes? And mind you, what comes even if you win. Because that's a shock more than anything.
Well,
so
no one's done anything from The Voice that's won it.
No, and I suspect, and these are only grizzlings and grumblings I hear from people involved there, if they don't get, quote unquote, if they don't get a star from that soon, that format will probably go. But it'll just emerge in something else.
Yeah.
So I will say to people, I'll prepare you for that, but you have to also be prepared. And I put them through a mock audition in this room, which is one of the most confronting things that some of those people will ever have.
Yeah.
Because I've been in the room, I've been in those auditions, and to be asked something random about, oh, by the way, what's your star sign? And stuff like that. You go, huh? What's that got to do with anything? But to be told point blank, in some circumstances, well, look, you're an original artist. You'll never sing one of your songs on this show. You'll never play the guitar on the show. You'll sing what we give you, and you'll basically sing it the way that we tell you to sing it. That's a big, big drop for somebody who's already been, quote unquote, who's already established themselves, or at least has their swagger going, you know?
Yeah.
For a lot of others, mate, it's a bit like if you've ever seen the musical Oliver. They're there going, please, sir, may I have some more? You know, can you please make me a star? The interesting thing is, and you did ask a question about the amount of people, everybody's well-intentioned uncle, auntie, sister, and best friend says, oh, Michael, you can sing.
Yeah.
Have you been told?
Only about 2,000 times, yeah.
Right. See, the good thing about being old like me is I don't fit any of the age categories. But somebody did ask me
We're
recently.
not that far apart, jeez.
Well, that's very kind of you. But somebody did ask me recently, said, if you were 19, knowing what you know now, would you go on it? I went, no, categorically.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go near it.
100%.
Would not go near it. It's interesting because the relationship I have, I'm very, very close friends with some of the coaches on those shows, like very close. And of course, you know, I won't speak out of school about that. Privately, some of those people, they don't like it either. And which would make you wonder, well, why are they there? Well, that's a question to ask them in all fairness. But
Yeah.
I can tell you that there's a couple of the coaches on those shows who have been extraordinarily kind to some of those contestants and have privately, away from the show, done something to help them when it's been warranted.
Right.
Of course, they don't want that advertised, and so you know we can't go into that any further. But
Yeah.
what's intriguing is that the seemingly by going on a show like that, you are somehow validated as a singer, which of course is preposterous as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Now, you and I have done countless amounts of gigs over the years, and then someone finds out what you do. But I can remember recently someone saying to me, "Oh, I looked you up. You're on Spotify. You must be good." And you go, and of course you've got to be gracious with your reply to
Yes.
that. And I said to the young lady, "That's very kind of you, but it isn't interesting what legitimized me. It's not the young lady's fault. It's the perception of what goes on."
Yeah.
I know of agents that I work with, some of their acts. They will instruct their act to go on one of those shows simply so they can advertise them as seen on whatever, and they can get a bigger fee.
That's, you know, when people ask me and they say, should I go on, one of these shows? Generally, The Voice in the last kind of 10 years.
Yeah.
I always say, if you're an artist, like if you're a songwriter, or you want to have an original music career, the last thing you should do is go on it.
Yeah,
if you want to be a singer and go out and earn some decent money on the corporate scene, your fee will go up from $1,000 a show to $10,000 a show for about 3 or 4 years after that show.
Yeah.
It's the only advantage of going on that show is you can ask more for corporates.
Mm-hmm. I reckon that's about it. That's about it. And you're right about the whether it's even that long a period of time, if you might get 3 or 4 years out of it. One of the things I do say to folks that are coming is, look, if you go on the show and it doesn't go the way you'd like it to, there's actually an upside. And they go, what can that possibly be? I go, in 6 months, no one's going to remember you. And I don't say that rudely because, see, they're on to the next lot.
Yeah.
They're certainly not going to bring up, like they used to do in one of those formats, they used to bring the person back who won the previous year and go, hey, have a look what Wendy has done in the last 12 months. Yeah. They don't do that at all now.
No.
Because what people are not knowing is some of those artists refuse to come back.
Yeah,
they won't go on. They just refuse. Some of them sit the contract out. And also, insofar as you're saying the person's corporate fee will go up, that will all. So I'll rephrase it. A percentage of that will go to the organisation that produces the show.
Yeah,
that's well documented. No, I'm not speaking out of school with that.
Yeah.
So their argument will be, well, you wouldn't have got that if not for us. There you go.
I mean, I've worked with several top 10 place getters in The Voice, and what really shits me is we record their tracks and make great songs, and The Voice or the production company or they never share it. They never say, hey, look what our... Now, if they were legitimately interested in people's careers, they would be saying, this person came second on The Voice 6 years ago. Here's their brand new album. Check it out. They don't. Yeah. Anyway, it's actually... I wasn't really thinking about talking about this before we started. And it's actually pissing me off to think about
Isn't that good? That's what we want.
So,
we want people out there to be pissed off. That's it.
Well, I think I can be pissed off on their behalf.
Nice. I like it.
So you were talking before about Seth Riggs. And for those that don't know, Seth Riggs is one of the kind of greatest singing teachers probably of all time. And he taught Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie and a million other singers, right?
Yes, he did.
How did you get involved with working with Seth and what was that like?
Well, if I can make it a short story, I've known of Seth since I was about 15 or 16 years of age, only through the fact that I've been an avid record collector my whole life, and I've read the liner notes to every album that I've ever bought in my life. And I didn't know what an engineer did or a producer, but I started seeing this guy's name as a vocal consultant. And I thought, what does that do? So he's there on the Songs of the Key of Life album, which came out in 1976, for those of you. He's there on
one of my favourite albums of all time.
If not the best ever, close to it. He's there on the Thriller album, Bad. He's on History. He's on all these albums, and I kept hearing about this. So roll forward to, I was 26 years of age. I remember it distinctly because I just made... So I've been in one singing competition in my entire life. I've never been in a talent quest or any of that sort of stuff. And there was a thing called the Australian Singing Competition. And you should go to... you can go to YouTube and you can spot me in that. And nice. I had to be 26 at the time to enter, or 26 or under. So the whole idea was you went through this whole process of auditions and then interviews. The first prize was $25,000. Now, in 1987, that was a substantial amount of money.
That was about $4.3 billion
Correct.
In today's money.
You could buy a lettuce at least, right? And during the interview process, they said to me, so if you won the money, what would you do? And at the time, I said something silly like, oh, well, I'd buy a house. They said, no, you've got to use it for study. So I went away and I thought, well, okay. And then this Seth Riggs guy came up because he'd produced a book called Singing for the Stars, which was a singing book which had cassette tapes on the front of it, folks, stuck to the front of it.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, I wonder if I could maybe work out something. Now, at the risk of sounding terribly ancient, no internet in these days, no Google, I haven't got a clue. I found out the publisher was Alfred Publishing. I found a number for the guy who owned it here in Australia. Said, is there any chance of getting hold of the publishing people in the US? I'd like to find out about this guy. He gives me a phone number. So in order to with difference of here of the LA time from Sydney time, I start calling this number, and it's Seth Riggs who picks up the phone. Little did I know that they'd given me his studio number. So I go, and I knew his voice because he's got a very distinctive voice, and I knew it was him for sure. And
Can you do an impression?
He goes, okay there, yeah. How you doing, Lee? Yeah, he's got this sort of really interesting kind of sort of husky sort of sound that he's got. Yeah. And I said, oh, hello, Mr. Riggs. My name's Leigh McRae, and I'm a singer in Sydney. And I've prattled on. I must have sounded like a bloody pubescent schoolboy. But I remember saying, I'm going to win this competition and come and study with you. How much do you charge? And he said to me, $0 to $200 an hour, depending on how talented you are. And I thought, wow. I said to him, and then he laughed. He said, look, it's $200 an hour. Now, just think of how much money that was in 1987. Yeah. I think our dollar was pretty good, better anyway. We might have been at 90 cents or something. Yeah. Well, I nearly sat on my ass and went, geez, I haven't got that kind of money. But anyway, I'm going to win the money, right? Yeah. Short version is I ran second in that competition. I didn't win the money. So I was bumming around Sydney doing what a lot of us do. I was doing gigs and I was doing sessions and I was still doing TV at that. I was fortunate enough to get the occasional TV job and whatnot. But I started auditioning for theatre and I just didn't have the sound that I wanted and I didn't know how to get the sound. And I went to, I think, at least 15 different singing teachers in Sydney and I just it wasn't clicking. It wasn't working. And so
Were you teaching at this point?
Yeah, I had been working, for anyone who's got the memory, I'd worked for Johnny Young at that point. I worked for Johnny Young. I had started teaching in 1985 and I was teaching, so I was teaching some of the kids from the show and all that sort of stuff. So I thought, how am I going to do this? So I woke up one morning and went, I'll go to the bank and get a loan. They'll give me money, right? Anyhow,
yeah.
So I remember
musos are a safe bet.
Of course. I remember filling the application out. I'll never forget it. The manager's eating an apple. And he goes, so what do you do, Lee? I go, I'm a full-time musician. And he says, oh, right. I just want $25,000 to go and study with a singing teacher in Los Angeles. That's going to work out. Decline. So, and when I tell this story, I'm always mindful of saying what I'm about to say. I do not advocate being dishonest in any set of circumstances.
I know you don't.
I do not. So I'm not even going to justify it. I went to a bank and told them I wanted a car loan. Now, in those days, when you took a personal loan, they deposited the money into your bank account. Whereas if you go and buy a car now, they pay the car yard or whatever it works. Yeah. So they approved me for a car loan. I left enough here for rent in the place I was living in for 6 months. Yeah. And I rang up Seth Riggs and said, I'm going to come to Los Angeles and I'm going to study with you. He was like taken back with it. So there's a little caveat to this. I prepared, did all the stuff I was going to do. And by the way, he was giving me lessons over the phone at 2:30 in the morning. He was checking, going, yeah, I think this is working well. I think we can improve this. And it was really good. And not charging me either at that point. I got to Honolulu Airport. These are in the days when, I wasn't taking direct flight. I was taking the cheapest flight I could, right? Yeah. Excuse me. And I know a lot of your listeners and viewers will identify with what I'm about to say. Suddenly I was stricken with anxiety like I've never had in my life. I'd never had this feeling before of that, what, am I kidding myself? I'm going to go and study with the guy who's trained at that point over 100 Grammy Award winners. Who am I? That voice got in my head. And we all know about that voice periodically. And And I made up a story then and there that I was going to tell people. I was going to say, I went, the guy was a bit flaky, he was a wanker, and I was going to have a holiday and come home. Now, you'd be pleased to know that 5 minutes after I heard myself conjure up that story, I went, screw it, I'm going for it. Got off the plane in LA, got a taxi to his studio and had a lesson 10 o'clock that morning after being on a flight all night.
Wow.
And that was a relationship that I went backwards and forwards to the States for 14 years and became one of his teachers, one of what they call the education management trainers, where I was responsible for training other teachers. His friendship and mentorship shaped me as a vocal coach, without question. And I learned things that are invaluable. And I say this is an odd way, but when I'm teaching in here every day, I picture him sitting third person in the room, saying, well, what would he do in this circumstance?
Wow.
And I just had the realization the other day, Seth is still teaching. He's 91 this year.
Wow.
But he was my age, so I'm about to turn 61. He was my age when I met him.
Wow.
And he was at his peak. There's no question of it. He was touring with Michael Jackson. He was still working with all the people Quincy Jones was sending to him. Josh Groban was just young when he was going there.
Wow.
Lionel, a lot of those people you'd mentioned. Look, he taught me that, firstly, nobody should leave your studio not feeling better than the way they came in. I saw him do that with every single person, even if they weren't getting what they were getting yet. And you do this, Michael, as well. I know I've worked with you enough. We always leave with the idea, look, yes, you've got some work to do. Yes, you've got to apply yourself a bit more, but I'm confident we can get this result. And that's something he taught me. I saw it because the beautiful thing was I had a lesson at 9 o'clock in the morning, but I sat then with him all day until 6 o'clock at night. I still have my notepad and pen that I took there. And then I must have driven him crazy, to be honest with you. We'd have a break, he'd have a coffee or something, and I'd say, how come why you did that exercise? And he was so generous with his time. It's remarkable.
How did that happen? So you've met him for the first time.
Yep.
You got off the plane. You've had your lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Did he say to you, just stick around for the rest of the lessons for the day?
He invited me.
I mean, can you imagine doing that yourself?
Well, I do it when I'm mentoring somebody. And, of course, we clear it with the client. We don't just have someone. Yeah. But, occasionally you go to a specialist. Maybe you go, like the ear, nose and throat specialist that I send my clients to. He'll have an intern,
Yeah.
Yet, for me, I'd be okay about an intern for that, but I do wonder about if someone was having their first singing lesson, they probably don't want a third person in the room.
No.
So we never do that.
I wouldn't.
But look, almost all of Seth's clients were pretty well established, and they were unbelievably generous to me. They were.
Wow.
And he would say, this is Leigh. He's come all the way from Sydney, Australia. Can you believe that? He was quite taken back with it. And I just wanted to learn. Look, I ended up driving him places. I ended up working at his home. I ended up doing whatever I could to clock up hours so that I could spend more time with him. And invaluable experience. If I had my time over, I'd do it exactly the same way. But I had a lesson every day, which is kind of funny.
How long?
1 hour.
For how many days?
The first time I was there for over 3 months. Yeah,
wow.
So it was 6 days a week.
And you're spending $200 a day?
He looked after me. He didn't end up charging that, bless him for that. And I sort of cut some of those hours out as well. Like I'm it's not even anything to be ashamed of. I raked leaves. I vacuumed the pool.
Yeah.
I ran errands. I taught.
It's the opposite of something to be ashamed about.
I worked in the other studio. Sometimes people would arrive early and he'd say, look, you're really good with those warm-up exercises. You just take them in there, warm them up first. So when they come in here, I can, because he had what they call a repetiteur. In other words, a piano player that would play for the opera people and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. And, to see people like James Ingram there and Michael Bolton, Madonna and these sorts of people, and they're just coming in to have a singing lesson. They're not coming in for any other thing. And I tell you what's interesting. I know people say the eyes are the window to the soul, and that's very, very true, but the voice is a very close second. You can tell something about somebody. I mean, you get people in the vocal booth. You can tell. I mean, you and I have had those moments when I've been trying to get a vocal and, it's not working, or it's not working because I'm concerned about something, or the lyric is, and the amount of times I've sat in the old studio with the desk there and just talked about what has to be done. To see somebody who's larger than life, for want of a better term, not struggling but having the same concerns that we all have is
validating.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great word for it. It's not like, I mean, I do so loathe that people go, see, rich people have troubles, and they have. You go, yeah. Well, who says no one has troubles? Or that money makes the difference, or not money. Look, that's a conversation for another time. Artists are trying to develop, and they're all trying to get better. And I've not met a singer yet. I don't know if you've had this, Michael. I've not met a singer yet who likes their own voice.
I reckon I have.
Right.
I reckon I have.
I've met
not initially.
Right. That's interesting. Let me clarify. I've met people who say, "Oh, yeah, I can sing, but I'm a bit pitchy there," and they're all doing that. Oh, my vibrato's a bit funny, or do you think? But we all learn to live with. Dare I say, we learn to live with those idiosyncrasies, and if you can learn to live with them. And I mean, that's a conversation maybe we'll get to the so-called perfect vocal now, one thing that he never, ever did, ever. And this is whether it was with Michael Jackson or whether it was with the gardener. He never changed the person he was. It didn't matter who it was. So, and that was a great lesson for me as well, that irrespective of whoever I've worked with, well-known or otherwise, the last thing a celebrity wants, from my observation, is to blow more smoke up their chimney.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they've had enough. Yeah. They don't need it. When someone comes through the door here, or I'm sometimes contracted to go and work with people because they have those kinds of resources, they've engaged me because they think I can help them. Yeah. And that's what we're there for. And the thing that he taught me, we were coming out of, we'd been to Neverland. We'd been to Michael's place.
Wow.
And we were driving out, and I was like, oh, my God, I can't believe it. I mean, that was an extraordinary experience. But he's saying, we pulled over to get something to eat, and he said to me, I want you to remember this your whole career. He said, it's one thing to work with the biggest star in the world. He said, that's a privilege. He said, but remember this. He said, they're not the star. You're not the star. The work is the star. And I've always remembered that because it was a crash to earth at that point. I went,
wow.
Oh. Now, that being said, when I've gone to the homes of Academy Award winners here, or well-known athletes or people that you would know of, I always say to them, from open-hearted, it's a real honour to have you here. I've admired your work for a long time. That's the only conversation we ever have about it. Yeah. I don't bother to go. And then in 1974, they're not here for an interview.
No.
They're here to get on with what's got to get on with.
Yeah.
And I have found, I've never ever felt intimidated in any way, shape or form whatsoever. And I've never, ever had anybody in that category, if that's the right way to put it, ever put on any airs and graces, or I've heard stories about some of them. I've been warned by producers, hey, when you get such and such in, I don't know, man. How lucky. I've never had it. It's never happened. No?
Luck, yes, to an extent, but it's also a reflection on who you are.
Well, that's kind, but it's also the vulnerability that takes place, you see.
Yeah.
I mean, the old gag, give somebody an option, sing in front of people or run naked through, the city, down come the pants. Well, at least I get it over and done with. It's done once, right? And then I'm finished.
Yeah.
And so it really does tell you a lot about somebody when they open their mouth. Who was the philosopher that said that? I can't remember. But he said, who you are screams so loudly in my ear that I can't even hear what you're saying. I just can't remember who said that.
Yeah, I love that. So, look, as tempting as it is to gloss over the fact that you went to Neverland, I'm not going to.
The main things with going to Neverland were that Michael used to open up that. So I would go and teach at a camp in Los Angeles. Seth would run this camp, speech level singing camp, in the summertime in July. And we would go to that. And every couple of years, they would just suddenly put on, oh, we're having an outing tomorrow. And so there's like 70 people at that camp wouldn't even know what we were doing. And then the night before, they would sign this incredible 4-page disclaimer to go to Neverland. And we'd have the most magnificent time there. We'd take 70 people. They'd split into 2 groups, and people would go to the amusement park there and a petting zoo, and then they'd feed us. And then, of course, everyone's asking the same thing. Is he here? Is he here? Well, he may have been there, but he never came and said anything.
Right.
So beyond that, on one of those trips, I remember distinctly. So he has a theater there, a movie theater, and one of the security guards had asked me to go and do something in preparation for the next activity. Whatever it was, he put the security pass through, and at the back of the theater, there were all of these hospital rooms, like a hospital ward with all this incredible equipment. Yeah. And for a lot of kids, it's their dying wish to go to Neverland. And so Michael had accommodated for all of that with all this high-tech medical equipment and all that sort of stuff. And I thought,
wow,
look, you'll get you speak to 10 people, you get 10 opinions about Michael and about what the kind of person he was or wasn't or should have been or did. I have absolutely no knowledge of any of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so what I do know is generosity was extraordinary.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a very surreal experience. But you could hear them working. And as I say, if you find those tapes, well, they're DAT tapes, you'll hear Michael working from a low E, 3.5 octaves, all the way up through his voice. And he would say to Seth on a regular basis, particularly when he was recording vocals like Dirty Diana and Bad, and any of those that had a bit of edge to them, he would say to Seth, don't clean me up too much today. I don't want a clean sound. I want something. Yeah. And, that's part of the artistry. And there's a lot of singing teachers, I'll just say it. A lot of people who don't necessarily subscribe to that way of supporting the artist, what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Now, there may be ramifications to that. There may be the fact that the singer might fatigue quicker or maybe even cause some problems to their voice. You can point that out to them, but you have no right to tell them it's wrong.
Yeah.
And
one
of the things I've always tried to do in here, because I've seen people who've had 30 and 40-year careers who, through circumstances of, I had the pleasure of working with Doc Neeson towards the latter part of his life. And for anyone knows, Doc Neeson was the singer with the Angels. A nicer man I've never met in my life. Just the most,
I've heard that.
The most delightful, kind and generous person. Would talk to every person as he was leaving, and a lot of people didn't know who he was. He just had this kind of generosity of spirit about him. But his voice was failing him, and then it turned out subsequently that unfortunately he had a very serious illness, and which may have been part of the reason his voice was failing him. But you can't take somebody who's had a 40-year career and sold millions of albums and toured umpteen times and say to them, you know what, Doc, what you're doing is wrong. You've got to somehow, like here I am, Mr. Hotshot singing teacher, and I know better than you. Well, I don't know crap at that point. What these guys knew about in that era was jumping in the truck and going 20 and 30 dates in a row up and down the coast, and building. And he told me a great thing that he used to do. For anyone who remembers or knows of Doc Neeson, if you don't know of him, go and have a look at him. His energy on stage was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And he told me that what he used to do was, if they say they're going on at 10 o'clock, at 20 to 10, he'd go for a run. And then he would literally come into the venue hyped up. And you remember he used to come on stage, he used to jump with the scarf and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
He was just ready to go. Now, the show, that got him ready for the show vocally and otherwise. But he'd say the problem is, of course, he couldn't sleep. He'd be that revved up afterwards, and he was having all sorts of problems there. But anyhow, I've never, ever tried to turn somebody's voice into something that they don't want it to be, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
The exception to that is you get a call from a theatrical agent. They go, I've got a young man and I think he can play the Phantom in Phantom of the Opera.
Right.
Well, he comes in, you say, hello, how do you do? We already know what the agenda is. We've got to try and work on that kind of sound.
Yeah.
But and that's fine. And of course the actor, they accept that, and we already know that's what we've got to do. So we're not at cross purposes. The greatest joy for me, if that's the right way to put it, is taking someone who's an original artist and saying, well, look, let's see if we can enhance what you do. Maybe that will change it, but you get to see the changes coming with enough time to go, no, I don't like it. Great. Don't like it. You're not going to upset me.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's I had a experience recently where generally if someone says, do you give singing lessons, I say no, because I've got no idea what the fuck's going on. I just open my mouth. But I met this guy and he said, my daughter's 16 and she's a singer, and would you give her a lesson? And he showed me a video of her playing at like some, school concert. And she was amazing. She had this incredible voice. She had the ability to be soft and intimate, but then also really let it go and have that real great belt. And she's just been working with the one singing teacher for the last 5 years. And I said, look, I can't teach her about the mechanics of singing, but I can teach her about what I look for in a great vocal performance as a producer. And so she came in and she was a great girl, and we had a really great lesson. I think I ended up, probably an hour and a half working with her. But this singing teacher that she'd had taught her to always hit the note. You never go, yeah, it's got to be, yeah. And as you know, that's one of my pet hates. And to me, that is so she'd basically been told to overthink singing, in my opinion. She'd been told to make sure that, sorry, I'm rambling a bit. But I remember when she came in and I said, look, you've probably been taught a lot about breath control and all that stuff. I'm not going to touch any of that stuff. What I want to talk about is why a great vocal is a great vocal. And I had to I basically just said, look, you've got to unlearn a whole bunch of stuff that you've been taught. And it was a really great thing. So I suppose what I'm saying is I'm going to muscle in on your territory and becoming a singing teacher from now on. And so look over your shoulder. That's fine with me. There's look, we saw this during the pandemic, and I understand what I'm about to say. I'm not being critical of, but it's true. It's an observation. A lot of people in our profession had to suddenly work out another way to make an income, and you can't deny them that at all. All of a sudden, every second person was teaching guitar online, or the drums, or voice, or whatnot. Yeah. And some of those folks were very, very good. There's no question of it. But a lot of them didn't have a methodology of how to deliver what they were doing. They were good at it, but they were say very efficient guitar players, but they weren't good at conveying the information. Yes. And so what we've got now, and we've had it for quite a while, is you can look up vocal tips left, right, and centre. And some of those things are very, very worthwhile. And some people say to me all the time, well, what's the best this and the best that? I go, if you're getting a result with it
and it's working, it's the best. And so whether it be that your grandmother used to sing and she said, I always used to have lemon tea, or whatever it is, you try it and it works, it's that, put that in your arsenal at that point. Put that there, that works. But there are people being told, as you so rightly said, how you're supposed to do something. And I've never subscribed to that way of thinking at all, ever. I've always said, my job, and I take this as from Seth, of course, is to trick you. And I use the word trick in the correct manner. If I can trick you into a different condition and you go, oh, that feels better. The good and bad news is it doesn't change it immediately. It changes it in the moment, but it may not be permanent yet. So you've got to work on that, whether it be a correction of a golf swing or a tennis hit or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Rarely do you just get it and then you change from that moment onwards.
Yeah.
I've not met a teacher yet who is not well-intended, I should say. I've met thousands of them. I trained hundreds of them around the world, in that period of time when I was training teachers.
Yeah.
Most people do go into it for very, very decent reasons, is the best way to put it. They want to make a difference. But my dad used to have a saying, I'd say to him, but they're very sincere. And he said, but always remember they could be sincerely wrong. Now, I'm not casting aspersions on the lady that you were talking about, but there are a lot of folks who are teaching, and I'm just going to talk about singing teaching because it's something I've got some expertise in, who not experienced enough yet to say, actually, I think I got that wrong. And it's something you have to have. I make fewer mistakes now than at any other time, but I still make them. I still misdiagnose, for want of a better term. But I've experienced enough to get to it much faster when I realize, actually, that's not the right approach for you.
Yeah.
Where I've seen people say, no, just keep doing it and it's going to happen. You've got to have enough experience to be able to work out whether it is the right thing, and more importantly, be mature enough to say, no, we're going to change tact here. I think this is a better idea. So,
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So, you'd recorded an album recently. How did the process of recording your own voice inform you as a teacher?
Oh, that's a very good question. Look, I'm not a fan of my own voice, but I've long ago reached a time where I can be somewhat objective about it. You know what I mean? So, and of course, that's why I have someone like yourself that I can trust to say, well, what do you think of this? Or are you hearing that? Because I think people think, I'll rephrase it, I think people hear things in their voice that they might perceive as being a quirk or a fault or whatever it is, that other people around the room are going, no, sounds fine to me. And you need that sometimes. I mean, most people at the bare minimum co-produce. I know some people will produce their own stuff, but I'm sure they must garner an opinion from somebody else somewhere. And the process of listening to your own voice is something, as I say, I'm quite okay with. Beyond that, it's a weird thing. I've never considered myself to be a good singer. Huh. Now, let me rephrase that. I'm not trying to have any false humility here or whatnot.
Yeah.
I just don't understand what the measurement is. I know what I like. I know what I like in other singers, and I admire and I respect and whatnot. I've always just tried to be honest when I sing and sing about the text, or in the case if you're playing a character in a show or something, that's a lot easier. But I've always just tried to find whatever it is that I'm singing about, and one of the things that I constantly encourage my students to do, I go, look, if you don't sing about something, you'll sing about anything, and that's something you've got to kind of watch out for. So I know that I can sing, but beyond that, you get people saying the weirdest thing. Oh, this is not me using this expression, but people will say, well, not that I think I'm the best singer in the world. And I'll say to them, well, who is the best singer in the world? And how do you know? Like, it's not the Olympic Games. You ran 100 metres in 10 seconds and I ran it in 9, therefore I win.
Yeah.
I just don't think of it in that regard. And of course I have favourites. Of course I have people that I think, oh, if they could just superimpose that person's throat onto mine, that would be just perfect. Thank you. I'll have Don Henley, thanks. I'll have Stevie Wonder. And, I'll have all those people. But I just sit there and I listen and I go, is that the best that I can come up with based on the song, like based on what the lyric is saying? And then I have people like yourself who have impeccable ears to say, oh, no, maybe try this idea or that idea. So I don't know.
You said, what's the measurement? I had oh, sorry, mate. Could I get you to turn down your monitor?
Indeed. That explains.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was doing a podcast last week with Tim Rogers from UMI. And
wonderful artist.
An incredible band, and I have been a massive fan of that band and spent hundreds of hours listening to his music. And he said, it was a very kind of impromptu chat, actually. And he said, I'm the worst singer in UMI, and he's also in a band called the Bamboos, which is great, and they do kind of more a soul-y kind of vibe. And he said, and I'm the worst singer in the Bamboos.
Oh.
And I said to him, well, isn't the purpose of singing to communicate? And I think that's the measurement. And I said to him, I think you're a brilliant communicator. And he said, yeah, I can't even remember his answer, to be honest. But to me, the measurement of a great singer is how well they can communicate feeling.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I feel that way as well. I feel very strongly about that. It's one of those things. Let's say you're a fan of Luciano Pavarotti, and then you have somebody, which I am too, and then somebody says, well, I think Bob Dylan is a much better singer than Luciano Pavarotti. I mean, it's a ludicrous comparison. And then someone else will use the old, oh yeah, but such and such has sold 20 billion records or whatever it might be, right? And you go, that's great. That's a great measurement of their appeal. Yes. But it in and of itself does not necessarily make them a great singer. So the what's the right way to put it there? The way that you arrive at what is a great singer, I guess, is what we talked about earlier. What makes a great coach or a great teacher is the one that gets results for you. So in the case of a great singer, you go, oh man, every time I hear that person sing, I just,
Yeah, exactly.
And we're around enough musicians, and you and I have had these conversations as well, where people are going, oh my God, did you hear the way the person sang that flat 9 on that 13 chord? Well, that's a small percentage of people doing that. Most people are not going with that, and nor should they.
No.
The thing either moves them or it doesn't move them. And I'm always on to singers about, if you're in the vocal booth and it's not happening for you, it's got less chance of transferring across to the listener. You know what I mean?
Yes. It's
like a comedian that doesn't laugh at their own jokes. Sort of thing. A guy starts telling you a joke, goes, oh, and you think, oh, this is going to be great, And that's what I think. One of the many things, many things that I love about singing is the fact that you often don't know what you're going to get in the moment, and you'll occasionally go, oh,
yeah, absolutely,
never experienced that before. How about that? And if you're okay with that, if you're a person that can do that, then you wind up having, I believe, a lot greater an experience rather than the predictability of what goes on. There's a very famous story about Sir Laurence Olivier, who the legend goes he'd given the most commanding performance of Hamlet in the history of the theatre, and a standing ovation and all that other stuff. And a couple of his contemporaries were in the audience I think Sir John Gielgud and Ralph Richardson, these kinds of Shakespearean actors. And they decided to go back, and I'll dispense with my attempted, we'll go and see Larry, see what Larry's doing. And so they go back, and the short version is his dressing room, the dresser opens, so everyone has a dresser, and Sir Lawrence is curled up in the corner in a fetal position, crying his eyes out. And they say, well, Larry, what's going on? You've just given the most commanding performance of Hamlet. And apparently he looks up to them with tears rolling down his eyes. He goes, I know, but what am I going to do tomorrow night? And this is the age-old, sometimes the quandary for a lot of singers, a lot of actors, is like, how do I top what I've done? And it's a dangerous thing. It's a dangerous thing to get into.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, in truth, you can never really do your best because we don't know what that is.
Yeah.
You'll have a lot of musical theatre people will talk to you about an A and a B show. And their A show is where they're absolutely on top of their game. Like, man, they're buzzing along like a Ferrari. The B show will be, it's more than acceptable. It gets them through the show. And it's well and truly the standard that is expected so that the show progresses. But people are doing 8 shows a week. Some of them do. You can understand it's not going to be 10 out of 10 every time.
Yeah.
It's
totally.
But you don't want 10 and then a 4.
Yeah.
And
preferably.
A very, very good friend of mine who's playing, I think he's back in Les Mis in the UK playing Javert, a guy named Jeremy Seacombe. You go and have a look at him. He was one of these guys that always used to rib me about being a singing teacher. He said this, you singing teachers, you take money off people and you prey on their insecurities. And I went, that's a good idea. I must start doing that, But one of the last times I was in the UK, not the last time before that, anyway, that's not making any sense. We were supposed to meet for lunch and he said to me, I have to meet you later on. I'm going for my swimming lesson. I went, what? So after I ribbed him for about an hour, I said to him, why? Why at this stage of your career, you're playing these roles, you're established here in the West End. And he said to me, and I love this quote, he said, I want to know how to do it on the days that I don't feel like it.
Yeah, wow.
Now that to me is one of the best understandings of technique. And you think about it, on the days you go out, and I mentioned earlier, you and I are, well, you're a far superior golf player to myself, but the days you go out and your swing's just working, who cares? But then there might be other times where you go, okay, I got to keep my head in this spot. My grip's a bit funny. Maybe you go through that. I don't know. But at least if you had a methodology to be able to go down through something, okay, this is in place, this is in place, this is in place, it would give you a way of hopefully enhancing the circumstance. And that's what I say to folks about, look, Seth Riggs always used to say to me, you study technique to not have the technique show.
Yeah.
So he said, what becomes commonplace to you is exemplary to other people. I always love that line. So the people think, so you don't have to sound, quote unquote, like a trained singer, depending on the area of music you're in. If you're an opera singer, you're going to sound like a trained singer because it's part and parcel of what goes with the style of music.
Yeah.
But it's one of the things that I was astounded by, was completely naive to, was the fact, well, why would Stevie Wonder get singing lessons? I mean, he can sing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in Stevie's case, and this is well documented, he had nodules when he was 16 or 17. And there's an album of his called Stevie Sings the Christmas Songs or something. He's singing the Christmas song, Chestnuts Roasting, that one. Mm-hmm. And you can hear it in his voice. His voice is all over the place. He had corrective surgery, and then he went, okay, I have to find a better way to do this. Now, there's no way in the world, if you get Seth Riggs on your podcast, that he's going to tell you that he taught Stevie Wonder his musicianship, because he didn't. Yeah. You and I both know that.
Yeah.
I've got people who come in here, their musicianship is just superior to anything I ever hear, their knowledge of chords and harmony and whatnot. But they don't have the mechanics.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
my job in that case is to trick them, as I said earlier, into the right condition by where they get the mechanics right, and then they go, oh, okay, how about that? So tricking yourself into the right condition is, pardon the word, tricky when you're recording yourself.
Yeah. Are there common mistakes that singers make that might be handy for people to know?
In the studio, you mean? Or
Are there certain things that you see time and time again that you think you could easily fix?
yes. I think people grossly underestimate the robustness, if there's a new word, of the voice if you train it accordingly. We've seen in the last, and I don't think there's any, I'm going to frame this correctly for you. I don't think it's any coincidence that since we started seeing some of these, well, the 12 weeks to stardom, I call it, that we're seeing people go on those who have not had the fortunate enough experience to know what it is to do 4 or 5 nights a week, 3 40-minute sets, week in, week out, and build their stamina, build their vocal stamina. And so that, for people who are coming to singing I would say in the last 5 years, that's a very common thing that I see. They'll sing 1 or 2 songs and they've got to have a rest.
Yeah.
Which I find it's a little foreign to me because it's not the area that I came from. Now, chances are they're having a rest because they're not singing correctly. But in a lot of cases, Michael, they're having a rest because they've not sung enough. They're just not fit. They're not vocally fit at all.
Yeah.
That's a very common thing that I see. Secondly, I'm not in any particular order, but another one I see is, I've got my little vocal thing over there. If the singers are young and you're recording them, the vast majority of them will do a line of a song and put their head around the corner and go, of course, you can fix that. So they've got that awareness. And I believe, and I'm sure you would concur with me on this, it's changed the preparation now.
Totally.
And I say to them, well, I can, but what's the point of being here? I said, if you want to go to somebody who's going to record you line by line and then correct it, let me give you somebody's number who does that. I don't do that. Another common mistake is always, and I'm paraphrasing, my mum thinks I should sing such and such. Oh, okay, you're 11, and she thinks you should be singing I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston because it's a nice song. Well, except what you don't realise, it was sung by arguably one of the greatest voices of all time, produced by David Foster, right? But a fully mature woman with a unique understanding about life. And hello. It's like, you're 10 and you want to play State of Origin football.
Yeah.
No one in their right mind would do it. But try and talk people out of that. Oh no, but so it's the same kind of thing. So they're 3 of the most common ones.
Yeah.
And
I
think that pretty much covers it.
Yeah. Speaking of I Will Always Love You, that was written by Dolly Parton, of course.
Correct. Yes.
I have an artist that I'm working with who said to me once, I wish I sounded like Dolly Parton.
Oh, well, I wonder why that is.
Because she's amazing. And I'm just wondering what your response to that, if someone said to you, because I think even when I came to you at first, back in the early 90s, I wanted to be Eddie Vedder from Pearl Jam. And it took me a long time to realize that I can only sound like Michael McGlynn. I can do all the impressions, but all I can offer the world is Michael McGlynn.
Yes. Which is good.
So
we don't need another Eddie Vedder. We've got one.
I thought you were going to say we don't need another Michael McGlynn,
well, that's
and
another
I concur. I concur wholeheartedly. So what would you say to someone who said to you, I wish I sounded more like so-and-so?
Well, pretty much what you said. Look, I remember seeing an interview with Tom Jones, and he, very early in his career, couple of things he decided on. He said he figured that there was always going to be a percentage of people who didn't like him. And he went, I just got over that and got going. And
Nice.
the other one that somebody told him, he said, nobody does you better than you.
Yeah.
And so he just decided to concentrate on what he did. And I've used this analogy because sometimes people will, in the comparative thing, they go, I got someone say to me not long ago, and try to see if you can follow this logic. I could sing the shit out of that person. Now, I don't even know what that means, right? But they're making some sort of comparison. I think what they're saying is I can sing better than them. And that's an odd statement in and of itself anyway. And I pointed out to them, I said, if you want to build the tallest building in town, you don't build the tallest building by tearing all the other buildings down. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So you just keep building. That's whether that be your career, your marketing, your socials, whatever it is. You just keep building.
Yeah.
When I'm a fan of singing under the influence, I call it. Yeah, let's learn the nuances. I was teaching a guy Tiny Dancer the other day, right? Such a great song. But that phase that Elton was in when he was doing those little blues runs and also that sort of pseudo country sound that pseudo, I don't mean that rudely. And I was getting this guy to get in and say, but you hear what he's doing there. And for those people with a discerning enough ear, they can pick it up.
Yeah.
Most people just get the note and the vocal and maybe the timing. And that's the thing. But I'll say to them, look, we don't need another Elton. Thank God we got the one we got. We don't need another Eddie Vedder or a Stevie Wonder. And they're not doing an impression of you, but they are singing under the influence. I know I had a conversation with Seth Riggs one time about Stevie Wonder, and he said that the two strongest influences for him vocally were Ray Charles for the phrasing and Donny Hathaway for the vibrato. Now, you listen to Donny's vibrato, right, and then you listen to Stevie, and you go, they're almost identical.
Yeah.
And so we're all singing under the influence. I try to take people back. So someone comes and says, a young girl, I love Ariana Grande. You go, she's a great singer, wonderful singer. But let me take you to the source of where she learned. Let me take you to the influences. Let's go with the influence. And occasionally, in fact, I'm working with a guy at the moment who's an Elvis impersonator. Well, of course, that's got to be impersonated. It's got to be as close as it is. Very specific thing at that point. Or someone who's going to play, I said earlier, they're going to play Phantom. They're not looking for individual phantoms. They're looking for people who kind of sound like the guy who did it before. Maybe a slight difference here or there.
Yeah.
So we try and get people to sing songs that they feel an affinity to, but also try to get them to do a bit of history. I'm very surprised by young singers that they, and this could be just being older or old, full stop, they don't seem to have the kind of historic curiosity that most of the singers that I grew up with, and most of the musicians that I grew up with seem to have. I don't have any specific reason for that. And certainly given the fact that everything is available, like you just ask Siri, right? And you can find out. Yeah. But even graduating actors from some of the better known schools that I've worked with don't seem to have a history of theatre or history of people that were in theatre and whatnot. That's a subject for another time. But I always try and take people to the influence. I think that's an important point.
Yeah. That's a really great piece of advice. I was listening to the radio the other day as I was driving out of town, and this song came on, and I was like, "Fuck, that's a great vocal." And I thought, "Is it Delta? It doesn't sound like Delta. It's a little more kind of understated than normal." It was this incredible vocal. Anyway, they back announced and it was a Delta song. And you have taught Delta. So when you're working with a singer, I mean, I remember I met Delta when she was 16 and she sang Born to Try at a gig that I was doing. And I just went, holy shit, that is a great voice. So when you're working with Delta, for example, I mean, what are you working with when someone's got that level of innate talent.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. So just to clarify, I worked with her at around about that period of time. In fact, before that single came out. And she was referred to me by her producer. And her producer called me and he said, look, she's having some problems getting into this part of her voice and that part of her voice. What I recall, because it's a long time ago now, right, is her coming in, kicking her shoes off and sitting at the piano and playing and singing. And I can remember, and I've only had this reaction 3 or 4 times in my life. I thought if this girl does not become a star, something's wrong. Because not only the way that she was, the skills that she had, and I want to say the way that she was, and I use the word cultured for want of a better term, she had her people skills together. You could tell that she had been, groomed is probably the right expression, towards being, amenable to people and whatnot. So
she signed with Sony at 13 or something, didn't she?
Yeah. So I didn't work with her for that long. I think maybe 6 or 8 weeks only, because she then got the job in, what was that TV show? She was in Neighbours or something, wasn't she?
Oh, yeah.
I think
so, yeah.
And she moved to Melbourne, and I referred her on to somebody there who worked with her for quite a while. But what I remember was her having very, very good skills already. And you're right about, so what do you do there? Well, I don't feel I have to say something to somebody if it's already working.
Yeah,
that's a kind of thing that you develop. You hear I'm supposed to say something. Yeah, I'm saying I think what you're doing is working very, very well. She was asking us a couple of very specific things that we were doing. I remember her mum being here with her, because I think at that time she was only on her L plates. That's how long ago that was. Right. Her mum asking a lot of questions about, well, why are you doing that exercise and that exercise? And I'm quite happy about that. I'm quite happy to explain the reasons behind that. So it's been very gratifying to see the kind of career that she's had, because those of us who, and I'm not claiming that, I don't know her beyond that. I know her, I've known her musical director, I've known people that worked with her to this day, as recently as last week. Her work ethic is extraordinary. There's no surprise as to why she's had the kind of success that she's had.
And that's a pretty common thing, isn't it? The people that make it mostly have a great work ethic.
Oh, yeah. My dad used to say this really kind of, what I thought was dumb thing. He'd say, hey, son, you see the people over there doing things? I go, yeah. He said, they're the people doing things. I go, yeah, Dad, that's really good. But that's it. I'm fortunate to have, 2 beautiful children, magnificent children. And my son is working in an area of sport where he wants to rise to the top level, and he's close to it. But the next bit requires that he apply himself even more. Yeah. And that's the rule at that point. We alluded earlier when we were talking about the TV shows, one of the worst things that happens, they plop somebody into stardom and that person hasn't got a clue.
Yeah, they're not prepared.
They're going, oh, what do you mean? And a lot of those people that have won those shows, I've been called in by their management when they're halfway through their first tour, because through no fault of theirs, they've never sung 2 or 3 shows in a row.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let alone then got up at 5 o'clock so they can be on the Today Show and do publicity. And then in the old days when they used to do in-store signings, I don't think anyone does that now. But remember the old days, you go to the shopping centre and they go crazy with them. They just got thrust into an area. The thing I say to all of my students, or say to anybody, is you get rewarded in public for what you're willing to do in private.
Yeah. Nice.
That's what it comes down to. So nobody sees the countless hours.
Yeah.
And I don't say this is not even remotely designed to engender any sympathy or empathy. It's just, these are just facts. Nobody sees the countless hours that you spend mixing, remixing, getting the right sound. And you know what? That's just part of the job. You're not asking for extra credit for that.
No.
But for those not willing to do it, and I can just relate this, put it directly into the into the idea of training your voice. For those who are not willing to do it, the last thing you want to do is be out in the road somewhere and go, oops, I can't sing tomorrow because I don't know what it is to sing. So, for those that are really dedicated, I say, you've got to practice your show every day.
Yeah.
They go, but I'm not doing a show every day. I go, no, you've got to get used to the fact that if you're required to sing for 2 hours a day, then you have to get in the habit of singing for that 2 hours per day.
I love that.
Well, you think about, you and I were both avid cricket lovers as well. This guy's practice and practice and practice, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
oh, absolutely.
Why would we assume? Well, I don't even know if I'm going down the wrong idea there. Who is assuming that you can improve a skill by not doing it?
I don't know if people are they?
I sincerely hope they're not.
But I do have a question for you on the back of what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
If someone has a gig the next day and their voice is shot, what should they do?
Well, depending on the circumstances, what they've got to try and do is reduce the swelling. Almost all conditions of voice, whether it be through overuse or illness, bacteria, whatever it might be, all result in the fact that the vocal cords are thick, and they've got to try and do what they can to reduce it. So some of the things, and they work very effectively, is steam is an incredible thing. And I mean, going to a place, I'm fortunate I live near a aquatic centre, and there's a steam room. And you go in there, and the steam is just makes a huge difference.
Okay.
Some sensible exercises. When we came on, I was joking, I have my vocal straw here. Yeah. There's a sort of a new buzz thing. It's been around, from what I can gather, for many, many, many years. It's become a little bit of a buzz thing probably in the last 5 to 10 years. And there's some great straw exercises, what they call an SOVT. It's a semi-occluded vocal tract. There's some good information on that. I have something on my website or on YouTube called a recovery session, and it's specifically designed to take people through that process. In the extreme, and I'm not advocating for this because this is a medical thing and I do not and cannot offer medical advice. If you have a good relationship with your doctor, there are some medications that can help you reduce swelling. And if that was the difference between it's the final 2 shows of the tour and it's worth, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, you might very well consider having an injection. It's a corticosteroid. Once again, I'm not advocating for it. That's between you and your physician.
It's an option.
It certainly is an option. It's an option that some singers take way too often. A case in point, and this is out of, so I'm going to make reference to Phil Collins. This is out of his biography, and it's him. It's his book, and also I have the audio book, and it's him saying it. So I'm not speaking out of school. When he was doing the Tarzan soundtrack, at one point he's in the vocal booth and he sneezed, and he felt this unusual pain at the back of his neck. He didn't think too much of it. The next day he was very, very sore and whatnot. Turns out he almost came to the point of breaking his neck. And what had happened was, this is by his own admission, he'd had so much corticosteroid over the years. His words, right? He had a doctor in every major city in every part of the world. And if his voice was not going too well, he'd go and get a shot or some tablets or whatever it was. Now, the problem with that is, long term, it leaches the body of calcium. And a lot of you, if anyone's seen Phil lately, he's in a wheelchair.
That makes me want to stretch.
Yeah. If you've seen Phil lately, well, they cancelled the Genesis tour due to COVID, but Phil is in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
He's had all sorts of problems as a result of that.
And is that calcium deficiency?
That's what they're saying destroyed the vertebrae. Now, don't quote me directly on the vertebrae and that, but it's certainly, out of his own mouth, that was the cause. And so, a young singer thinks, oh, no, well, that's not going to happen to me. Well, I hope not. But so they're the things that you can do. Vocal rest is one of those things which is often misconstrued. Complete vocal rest is somewhat advisable. but you still have to remind the muscles and the nervous system that they've got to do something. Now, notwithstanding, once again, you would take this in line with professional advice from a medical professional.
Yeah.
If it's sore and if it causes you irritation to move, do warm-ups or anything like that, then you'd be best to leave it.
Right.
But if you're capable of doing something, you've got to measure by result. Oh, that's actually feeling better. Because the only way you're going to thin those vocal cords out is they've got to be stretched. Not jerked suddenly, they've got to be stretched. And so there are some things. Look, I've worked with people before they go on. It's only happened half a dozen times at most. And we've run some exercises with them over the phone in the dressing room, and it has been the difference between them going on. Once again, they're not on their A game at that point.
Yeah.
But they're getting through the show, and they have an awareness then that they tend to, not, at the very least, not compound the problem and make it worse.
Yeah, right.
Now, it's a personal decision. For a lot of singers, there's often, especially if they're a touring act, there's often a lot of money involved, and there's also the reputation. You know, I have a young lady that comes to me who, well, pre-COVID, post, I can't remember what it was, but they had tickets. They were in the auditorium. It's about to go into the room to see Lady Gaga in Vegas, and the show was cancelled. Now, we know, I'm sure, Lady Gaga's a workaholic, right? I'm sure that there was legitimate reason for it. And these people had travelled specifically to the States to see that show. And so, look, it's not going to ruin Lady Gaga.
So there's a lot at stake.
There's a hell of a lot at stake.
Yeah.
You think what it takes to put an act like that on for a night with the crew, the lighting, the advertising. There's a tremendous and I know that they're insured against unforeseeable events and all the other stuff that goes with it. But there isn't a singer who doesn't want to go on. There isn't a sportsman that I know. I know some professional sportsmen very well that they'd rather play than be injured. Yeah, I mean, I know that it sounds almost absurd to say it because I've had people say, "Oh, that guy's getting $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year to sit on the sideline. He doesn't want to sit on the sideline.
Yeah,
he got to earn that money in the first place because he plays. You know,
and
totally. And singers want to go on and do it. Actors want to go on and do the show.
Why is whispering bad?
Because what people tend to do is they tend to try and communicate at a volume level that isn't actually commensurate with whispering. So that they'll whisper too loud in essence. And so and there's also some aspects of you've got abduction and adduction going on at the same time. To abduct is to take away, to adduct is bring together. And so whispering, now it's not whispering at all. It's whispering
loudly.
Whispering loudly, you know, hey, everyone, on Friday night, this... No. That's not how your voice is meant to be used.
So if I'm fatigued, I can whisper like this, and that's okay.
There's a whole bunch of reasons as to why you should just let it go, and that you should try and use your voice, dare I say, as normally as possible, because that's where it's most conditioned to sit.
Rather than resting?
But if...
I'm very interested in this because as you know, my voice isn't the most robust in the world, and I was doing 5 nights a week probably 10 years ago, and it was always a struggle.
Yeah.
But the amount of times that it caused great stress, I'd have a very, very fatigued voice. I wouldn't know if I'd be able to sing the next night. I had no falsetto.
Yep.
The stress levels just of that were crazy.
Oh,
but
it can be awful. I've had it myself, and I can remember one in particular. I had a late show, like a late gig, and I had an early morning call for a morning television. And in those days, I was a terrible sleeper, just awful at it. So I would come home from the gig, and I'd basically stay awake. Because if you've got to go and get up at 5 o'clock, I mean, I'd sort of nod off a bit. But I can remember thinking, it's an awful feeling. I know exactly what you're saying. You get that kind of cold shudder because there's, especially if you're going to go on television, that's where you want to try and be at least in half decent shape, you know. But to go back to your specific question, you said instead of vocal rest, once again, I would put it down to whether it's painful to speak. If it's painful, then you should rest at that point and should try and do things like the steaming and all the other stuff I mentioned in order to try and to alleviate the soreness. Perhaps at that point you've got a bacteria. Perhaps, once again, this is where you bring a professional in who may get you onto a course of something, or you may decide to have your own remedies. Lots of recommendations out and about. But at some point, the way I view it now is like someone has a hip replacement or a knee replacement, to get him out of bed the next day. In the old days, used to rest them for ages and ages, but then they worked out that the neurology suffers. Actually, the nervous system is not damaged, but the longer you don't do something, the more it tends to drop into that particular condition, you know? Excuse me a sec.
Yeah, I'm going to close my window because I've got a bird squawking outside.
How dare it?
Doesn't it know we're in the middle of a podcast?
It's a very stressful thing. I've got, I've had many artists over the years confide in me about those things, and I had a list. I made a list. People waking up with night testing. I called it. They'd wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh, I've got a voice. Yeah. And go back to sleep.
Yeah.
Did you have that?
I've done, absolutely.
Yeah. I've done it too.
I've probably done it all.
I've done it too.
It's incredibly stressful, and it's a stress that instrumentalists don't really have to deal with.
Unless they damage their finger and they go, oh, I've caught my finger in the car door. Well, of course, you know, that's a stressful thing.
Of course, but that's akin to damaging your throat or something.
Yeah.
But just in terms of getting sick or tired, you know, if as a piano player, it doesn't matter how much of a cold I've got, I can play the bloody piano.
Oh, yeah.
But I can't sing.
Yeah.
And so I think singers have by far the toughest job of anyone.
And a lot of them are perhaps deservedly so hypochondriacs to some extent. I mean they'll probably get a little too carried away. But it's best to err on the side of caution. Look, something I learnt years ago, and I'm a casual runner. You know, I'm a person that runs a lot, but I'm not.
You're a casual runner who's run the Boston Marathon.
The Berlin Marathon.
Berlin. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Berlin Marathon. But
that's not that impressive.
No, they're correct. But here's what I learned when I did that marathon. We arrived a couple of days before, and my wife and I were planning to, you know, have a look around Berlin while we were there, of course. And one of the guys we were staying in this hotel with all these really experienced runners, this guy said to me, whatever you do, keep off your feet tomorrow. Now, this is common sense, right? So we were planning to trek, and as I said to my wife, Kylie, well, we won't walk as much. You know, we'll get the tram and we'll get a bus and we'll get Ubers and whatever. And it just is sort of common sense. So a lot of singers don't seem to understand the accumulative usage of the voice. And I say to singers, the very first lesson people have with me, I say, I want you to remember this. Your voice knows usage and recovery. They go, what? I go, usage and recovery. It doesn't know that you're here in this room. It doesn't know you're singing in front of 20,000 people. It doesn't know you're rehearsing. It only knows usage and recovery. So you have to have an awareness of that at the bare minimum. Not a paranoia, just an awareness. So when you leave here today, maybe you'd normally, you know, in the car, call up your friend. Maybe take that time to rest.
Yeah.
You know? Maybe take that time to just go, especially if you've had a decent workout in here, which can often happen. So I said, just take the time to rest and work out, okay, that's a certain amount of time I stayed off my feet, I call it. Now, you can take that to extremes. Some people do. Well, I don't even know if this extreme would be not talking at all. Excuse me a sec. I know for me, when I was doing shows back to back, I would have a rule about if it was a theatre show, saying a load of people, and then no talking until midday the next day, and even then, only if you had a matinee, because you've got to at least be up and woken up and have yourself ready for it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't necessarily because I was having any trouble. I thought that was going to give me peace of mind, which is what you're looking for when you're in that set of circumstance. Yes, it did. Yeah. Yeah, it worked well for me.
Peace of mind's huge for singers.
Yeah. And I've also, been in that many backstage situations, whether I've been in a show or I've been backstage warming someone up, and you hear people more or less going through their performance in their warm-up. And you go, no, if you watch a sporting team warm-up, especially if something that's a contact sport, for argument's sake, they don't go full tilt in the warm-up.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't need to. You know that you've got the skills. You're just trying to wake up your nervous system. So I've heard people in the next room trying to sing if they've got a high C in something, just whacking out 15 or 20 high Cs. You go, well, yeah, okay, if that works for you.
What about the Jimmy Barnes method of warming up?
Oh my Lord!
Way back in the day, I think he would. I don't think he drinks anymore. But
no, he doesn't. No,
he would pop a bottle of vodka and he'd just go and just do a big scream and then go on stage, and that was it. So, but I mean, that's a freak set of vocal cords.
Yeah,
that guy, right?
So I was on a TV show. It's a long time ago, but we were at the old entertainment centre in Sydney, and it was the grand final of the NRL footy show, and I was doing something, and I had some singers with me, and I heard that sound, the sound that you just made, coming from X amount of dressing rooms away, and people are there. The girl was singing with us; she's doing her makeup, and she's on Jimmy's gig as well. And I go, what in heaven's name was that? And she just keeps going, she goes, oh, that's just Jimmy warming up. Like everybody knew it except me, right?
Yeah.
So I kept hearing this thing, so I made my way round to get a closer view or a closer listen. And there was Jimmy with he had a polystyrene, he had a cup with water. So you're right, he doesn't touch alcohol at all now, is my understanding. And he was doing that guttural scream thing to get that voice going. And I've only ever spoken to him twice. It was on that night. I've spoken to him another time. But a friend of mine interviewed him about his singing approach. And he said that he described his voice like, he said, it's like a Mack truck. He said, it takes a while to get going, but then you can't stop it. So he gets into that kind of method. So he uses primarily what's referred to as the ventricular folds, or the false folds, but not to be confused with falsetto. So a lot of people think, so he's able to use a particular part of the chord and compress and get that sound that seemingly he's either become more conditioned to, or there's some speculation that there's less nerve endings in it and so it doesn't hurt. But I've heard him say, not to me, but I've heard him say in other news, he's done things, he's been able to do shows when he couldn't talk.
Yeah.
Which is, you find quite extraordinary.
And he's also come off stage with a bleeding throat.
Yes, I think that was in the latter part of Cold Chisel. I think he talks about it in that documentary. So, once again, I've not had this kind of conversation with him personally. So, but my friend who interviewed him quite extensively, he said he just doesn't. Well, he doesn't understand singing teachers, and that's the quote, because he just doesn't understand the concept of how to get people to sing like that, or that. I mean, once again, if he was in here, what am I going to say to him? Well, you're the most one of the most successful artists in Australian recording history, but clearly you've been doing this wrong. I mean, he politely probably told me to bugger off and leave.
Yeah.
So, he's extraordinary. One of the many things I love about Jim is Jim, like he's my mate, right? But one of the many things I love about him is when he gets on stage, he's full of energy.
Yeah.
You know what you're going to get, Yeah. And he'll just...
Yeah, absolutely.
The band is always good. They always kick. And he knows how to deliver, man. He really does. So.
Yeah.
And
he's
great songs. Some of his songs. And so...
And back in the day, his tone was...
So the East album, which is up on the wall behind me somewhere, if you can find it.
I can't see it.
Where are we, Jim?
Where are you, Jim?
Next to the Black Sabbath album.
Oh, there it is.
That's the East album, next to Michael.
Between Kiss, yeah.
So the vocals on that, Standing on the Outside, Choir Girl,
Unbelievable.
ridiculous.
Unbelievable
Just
tone.
insane, right? Seemingly sometime after that, who knows what went on with him. And look, if you want to have a great read, get his books, Working Class Boy, Working Class Man. Even better, get the audio books because they're read by him.
Yeah, nice.
And his stories are phenomenal. So
No, they're amazing. I was lucky enough to record a podcast with him. I wasn't doing the interviewing, but I went to his studio with the gear. And very, very lovely, affable man.
Yeah,
I've got a lot of time for it.
There's people. So I was going to say, there's people. They say I've only had the 2 interactions with him. I know people who will talk about Jimmy at one stage of his life and Jimmy now, and they all say that Jimmy now is, and that's understandable. He's when you read his books, he's dealt with some awful things, and I mean horrible things. So, more power to him.
Mm. You worked with Human Nature.
I did
in the early days, and when you're working with a group like that, once again, bunch of great natural singers.
Yep.
What's it like when you see their career explode, and how much love and pride do you feel in those moments?
It's very interesting. It's something. I think I know what you're alluding to. Like, do I feel that I have that I've contributed in some way to their success, or
I'm not alluding to anything. Right. I just wonder what it feels like when your students become, the hottest ticket in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And
well,
just how does it feel?
I'm over the moon for them. They're a lovely, lovely bunch of guys. They really are. Once again, in reference to what we talked about Delta Goodrum earlier, the work ethic is extraordinary.
Yeah.
The work ethic is, and that's the thing that a lot of people, I can remember one time one of them left their call sheet here, or whatever it was, their weekly regime, and, there's the gym sessions, there's the dance classes, there's the vocal class, there's the in-store, and they were flying literally one day, Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane, like in one day to do in-stores and whatnot. And it's the stuff that people don't see.
Yeah.
And they sort of lean on their hand and go, "Oh, that would be delightful." Well, look.
I don't know that it would. No, I'd hate it.
You can have it. I'm not having it.
No.
See, a career is a great idea. Of course it's a great idea.
Yeah.
So is having a successful business, or a great body, or being healthy. They're all really good ideas. And most people in their right mind, if you say, "Look, would you like to have incredible health, or would you like to feel like crap?" They go, "Of course, I want the incredible health." Then there's the things that have to go with that. And in their case, look, I saw them go right through that boy band phase where, they were lucky to have some good hits, and they changed producers. Think about the things that those guys did. They were in Europe. They were opening on a consecutive basis. They were opening for Michael, then flying and opening for Celine, and then opening for somebody else. They performed at Wembley. They did all these incredible things.
Yeah.
They're and they literally grew up in the next suburb that I'm here in the southern part of Sydney.
Yeah.
And you go, "Oh, what's that?" Well, from the southwestern part of Sydney to being the top line act in Vegas, and they've recorded, the Motown albums and all that stuff. Look, I couldn't be happier for them, and they were smart too. This is a lot of people don't realize they are smart, but they were smart with their choices, because if they'd have kept doing what they were doing, it was probably going to run out. And you'd now maybe catch them occasionally at a corporate gig or something,
an RSL near
perhaps, and that realistically was possibly what they were looking at, because they they're all in their 40s now at least, which is not old, but it's no longer teen.
No,
and the stuff they're doing, they're really good at it. To hear them stand in here and sing 4-part harmony,
Yeah.
is delightful.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely delightful. And so, full disclosure, there were two guys in there that my approach was not as conducive to what they were doing, but they were polite enough to kind of, when I say tolerate it, they were here, their management put them in here. I spoke to their manager and said, look, I don't think, and I won't name names, I don't think blah, blah, and blah, blah are as interested. But they stayed with it. But the other two really took to what it was that I did. Now, that's just the law of averages, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so I do every now and again hear from one of them or a couple of them. But the gratifying thing for me, if anything, I know that there was a point in their early stage of their career where they were not good at sustaining back-to-back performances.
Right.
And I'd like to think I've had something, not full credit, something to do with that they were able then to really become robust. But it's also in line with more demands placed upon you, and you rise to the challenge and you meet the demand.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of it. But yeah, fantastic.
If people want to get singing lessons with you and they're not in Sydney, I hear through the grapevine, and the grapevine being you, my friend.
I'm the grapevine.
That there's like an online course beginning.
Yes, I'm just in the final stages of releasing. Look, I'm not really in a position to take too many one-to-one people. It's just the way that my life's going with other ideas that I'm working on and projects I'm working on, and I'm really, really happy with the people I've got. There's a couple of opportunities here and there, but I've had so many requests over the years that what happened, look, during COVID, we all discovered, hey, look, I'm not your chiropractor, so I don't need to grab your neck and twist it, right? That with what you and I do, we can do it online, right? Now, of course, nobody thinks that that's a big deal at all now, but the fact that I survived and was able to still service my clients for such a lengthy period of time and not have anybody in the room at all got me to thinking beyond what I was doing here. So the online academy will be up and running. I don't know when this goes to air, but it'll be up and running by the end of September 2022. And so people can keep an eye out for that. It's the Vocal Mastery Academy online. And what it does is it offers, I've done my utmost to set in place lessons and advice exactly the way I do it one-to-one. But here's what I believe is the difference. You get, as part of, it's a subscription basis thing on a month-to-month basis, you get to submit a video per month and you get feedback from me on that. Now, that makes it a lot more unique. I'll rephrase that. Makes it a lot different than a lot of online courses where you go, well, I'm learning these guitar things, but how do I know if I'm really going very well at it?
Yeah.
And so in line with the partner, with my friend that I'm putting that together with, I said, I'll only do it if we can offer that service to people. And so, and look, that's the conditions that we're doing it. So that'll be up and running by the end of September 2022. And look,
this will be going out, I think, around about then, because I've got a bit of a backlog of these.
Our backlog's good, but that's lovely. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, very good.
Well, that's exciting. I'll try and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I'd like to ask you a bit of a philosophical singing question.
Please do.
How much of singing is head and how much of singing is heart?
Oh, dear. It's not like the way you're asking the easy ones. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's certainly a combination of both. But that's not a particularly good answer. I sing because I love it, and I sing because it was a love that was instilled in me at an early age. I can't remember a time where I didn't sing. To whatever degree, doesn't matter. I'm not worried about it. it's always one of those things where I feel like saying to some actors and singers I work with, you should have kept this as a hobby. It's not because you're not good enough, but you're calculating and everything else that goes with it. And so for me, I still get excited when I hear a great vocal. I still get excited when I see somebody develop and that they sort of come out of themselves. It's all the other things that come from singing for me and my observation of that are of far greater value than, if you're fortunate enough to be a star and whatever goes on with that, well and good. But if you don't turn around and use that stardom for something worthwhile, I don't understand it, And fortunately, most people do. Most people do.
Absolutely.
The head part of it is, I did a vocal on something yesterday for a friend of mine, and you would think after, I'm 60, and I think I did my first demo at 14 or 15. You would think after that period of time that I'd be just comfortable with doing it, right? And I'm comfortable in the act of it. That's easy. But then standing back afterwards and going, okay. But I'm always asking myself if I can do it better. And I have to refine myself by going, have I conveyed the message there? That to me is the end result when I can walk away from something. So that's still a bit of a head thing. I'm way, way, way past being concerned about criticism or anything like that. That went a long, long time ago.
That's good.
I
wish I could say the same.
Well, I'm happy to be critiqued, but if it's kind of got to pass, I guess, my own expectation, my own standards. I can hear a vocal. I actually recently a friend of mine edited some TV shows that I did in the 80s. And I was watching them, and of course we all laugh at the haircuts and the this, that, and the other. But I can remember where I was as a person. I don't mean in that TV studio. I mean where I was as a person in my life at that time by the way I was singing.
Wow.
And so I have that incredible relationship with it. And yet I've got countless amounts of gigs. You and I have done them. We've all done them where we go, oh, did I sing there? So you can sort of tell it's sort of indicative of where you are as an individual. And so I don't know. I don't know if I've answered that question as adequately as what I can, but
no, you've answered it.
That's
very,
my kind of
very
that's
well.
my honest aspect to it.
You've answered it very
so
well.
Old saying, you get in your head, you're dead. If you can get out of there, well and good.
Yeah. I always talk about being in the zone like a sports person.
Yeah.
And, the great sports people, I think, are the same as great artists in the sense that you put in the work. The way I look at it is you use your head when you're putting in the work for your training.
Yeah.
But when you get out on stage or on the field, you're trying to switch that off and just let it happen. That's where all of your training comes to fruition.
Well, I always say to myself, what I don't know now is not going to make any difference. So, but that being said, I have personal pride in the fact that I prepare very thoroughly for something I'm doing. So I can't think of a time where I've ever gone on stage or done where I thought, oh, this is going to go bad. I've never, ever had that thought. I've had we talked about earlier, will my voice be okay tomorrow? Like, it's been a bit tired or whatnot. But fortunately, when it's really counted, I've been fine. I've been pretty good. So, but I've never, ever thought of anything having a poor outcome. I've not always been pleased with the outcome, but that's a big difference between that and it being poor.
Yeah.
You're right about with sport people, preparation is everything. I watch Roger Federer hit a forehand down the line. He's like a graceful ballerina to me. He's just going, look at that. But that he's practiced those things a gazillion times.
Yeah.
And in those kinds of sports, they're doing it in the key clutch moments. Hopefully, as singers, we don't have that same kind of pressure. You get it in a TV show, like as in a reality TV show. Yeah. And this is why I alluded earlier, some people are not ready for that. You've seen a fair amount of people that you and I know go on there who are seasoned veterans.
Yeah.
And they haven't got through it very well either. I'm not talking about the end result that they won or they didn't win. I'm talking about that they're capable of better. But that pressure environment, it's not meant to be that. You understand if you're playing tennis or if you're playing soccer or rugby league or something against somebody, the outcome is usually to be the victor. But not in art. I mean, for goodness sake, who made that bloody idea up? It's pointless,
Yeah.
It's awful stuff.
Leigh, you were my only singing teacher,
right?
But more importantly, you were I would say my first mentor, and I know I've told you this before, but I used to go to our singing lessons and learn a lot about life from you. I love you very much, and I'm very, very grateful for you coming on the podcast.
That's very sweet of you. Thank you.
You are not only an absolutely wonderful, wonderful teacher and singer and artist, but you're a wonderful, wonderful human, and I value you more than you know. And also, you were the first person I knew that swore proficiently, and I said to myself, I won't bring that up because you've got this whole thing of butter won't melt in your mouth now, but you taught me a lot of words.
Well, firstly, mate, thank you for what you said before. I mean, that means the world to me. Thank you. I don't want to comment. I don't want to take anything away.
I've told
from that
you that before.
Moment. Yeah,
I've told you
I know
that
you have many
times.
I learned the importance of being a mentor because I was mentored. Look, I said to someone the other day, if I've achieved anything in my life, and that's open for discussion, it's because I've been raised up on the shoulders of other people. I had the best mentors, the best friends. I still do. I still got people I can go to, and so I understand when a young artist is coming in, a young singer. They're a fledgling, and your job is to really, well, it's cliche to help them spread their wings and fly. That's the whole idea of it.
Absolutely.
And the interesting thing is, I'll ask people about their goals and whatnot, and I'll say to singers, "Do you want to know what my goal is for you?" They go, "Whoa, that's unusual. What is it?" I go, I want to be the last singing teacher you ever have to go to.
Nice.
And it said, one day you'll leave here, but you'll leave here with the knowledge. You'll leave here with everything that I've got should you decide to take it on board. Whatever value that brings to you, I'm not leaving anything on the table at all. And so if you then see an opportunity or a situation that you can pass that information on, then you go ahead and do it. If you see the value in mentoring other people, then you go ahead and do it. But when I say the last singing teacher, look, you'll certainly find people who are going to help you with style in different areas than me, and people who are better at harmonies than I am, and all that stuff. That goes without saying. But let this be the last place you have to visit to get your voice in shape and get your vocal career on track. And if you'll allow that, I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful honor for me to do it. I don't take it lightly. And people say they talk about, the well-known people and whatnot. I don't distinguish between the two. I know that an 11-year-old walking through the door is potentially in 10 years, potentially a full-time professional in theatre or a full-time recording artist. And trust me, having been in this now for 41 years, it goes by like that. Yeah,
it really does.
It goes by very, very fast. And the things that have not changed is the necessity for application, good advice, good mentoring, and a work ethic beyond out of here. I say to people, look, I see you 1 hour a week on average. I see some people more often than that. It's the 167 other hours I don't see you is what makes the difference. And tongue in cheek, I say to them, and they all laugh about it. I go, look, don't forget these things I'm telling you because I'm not going to be around forever. And we all have a bit of a chuckle about that. But the truth is that's the way it's going to go. And I want you to take on the stuff that works for you, and you will not offend me by getting rid of the stuff that doesn't. Just chuck it in the bin. That's fine. And so it's something that, once again, I go back to my mentor, to Seth Riggs. He said to me, you help a singer get over their vocal problems and you help them get on with their life. And when I first heard that, I thought,
beautiful. I love that.
That's a bit heavy, but he's right. He's absolutely totally right. And that's what we work on here. It's interesting you should mention it. The other night, a young guy I'm working with, terrific young man. A lot of people, almost everybody records on their phone now. And he happened to have his phone up. He was going to show me a photo of something he'd done. But all his lessons, they're not marked as singing lesson, August, whatever. They're marked as Leigh's life lessons, number 4. And I thought that was very, very cute. I said...
That is my experience.
And I said, anyhow, wonderful. I said, but you are learning something vocally. He said, oh, yeah, absolutely. And I know he is because he's really coming along well. But... look, man, I haven't got a complaint in the world about what I do, how it's done. I want to do it on scale more because I believe I've reached a time where, I don't think of myself as an elder statesman, but I think of myself I've got the experiences to take to other people all over the world, which I've done that in person. I taught in the US, as we talked about. I taught in Munich and Poland and all these wonderful places. But, we don't have to. The
technology can facilitate it now.
And it's there with regard to the academy we're talking about before. It's 24/7. It's 365. All that stuff which everyone can provide now. And, you're getting extraordinary results working with people all over the globe from your apartment. And conversely here as well. It's wonderful. Would it be different if they were in person? Well, of course it'd be different, but that doesn't mean it's better.
No.
It's just different.
No, it's just different.
And, as I said earlier, we're not the chiropractor. We don't have to crack their neck. We're not the hairdresser who actually has to do something. We have these. We have some ears. We have our experience. And then we have hopefully our effective way of communicating to the person on the other side of the glass there. Here's what I'm looking for. And I reckon you can do it like this. And let's try that. And then, as you know, you give instant feedback. You go, yep, good for you. You got it. That's the way to go. Yeah. Good. Let's keep doing a bit more of that. And,
Well, it's like I think to myself, I don't know if my life would have been better, but it would have been different had Simpson given me the role of Javert as a 23-year-old. Give Simpson my regards.
I will. It's a running joke that we keep going
I really couldn't go through the podcast with at least shouting him out.
Yeah. Well, look, I wonder too. I don't like to be dismissive philosophically or what I call too self-helpy, but sometimes. Maybe there's a way to view these things. Sometimes it's the things you get said no to that make a difference. Now, I don't know that was one of them.
Absolutely.
But I know for me, some of the areas that I was pursuing them ardently. Like I was going for it, trying to make things happen, and I'd run full tilt into a brick wall, metaphorically and otherwise.
Yeah, yeah.
And grumble, and bloody, and I kept lining up for shows that I because that's what apparently I was supposed to do because I'm a singer, right? And I'm an actor. And I would be going, and I had all my discussions with different record companies. I really, went right through that. I peddled my songs, but I came to realize that I was not willing to pay and I want to say the price, let's not make it into a sob story. I was not willing to do what they wanted me to do. That doesn't make them wrong and me right. It just means it was not a relationship that was going to work.
Yeah.
I knew it was not going to work. So, and
Totally.
you will never, ever hear me ever complain that I didn't have some unbelievable recording career and I'm not a big star around the world, because that is not the issue. The circumstance of not getting the exposure through record deals and whatnot was a decision that I actually opted out of, you know, and for very good reason. Now, I do this running joke all the time, but folks in here, they go, I'm looking for a record deal, and I'll do if I get them a little bit of paper and I write record deal on it, and I go, there it is. And of course they laugh, and I go, that's about what it's worth at the moment.
Yeah.
It's not much better than that. And by the way, we don't like your hair. And look, you're carrying a little bit of weight, you know. And if you could just be a little bit more like, you know, such and such. And if you could just, for Christ's sake, give me a rest. What are we like ordering up a pizza? You know what I mean? Yeah. But I also don't badmouth all those situations, because there are some people it works for. There's some people, they go, you know what? This is a great fit. And the worst one for me, Michael, people come in, they go, I say, have you got that song going, or did you ring that person? Oh, well, you know how record companies are. I go, no, tell me how they are. You catch people out immediately. How many of you, like, who'd you speak to? And which I'm not saying that they should or they shouldn't, but don't give me, my dad used to have a saying as well, said, you better wipe your mouth because bullshit's running out of it. You know what I mean? It's. I'll tell you why most people. You asked me a question earlier about the common mistakes I see. Most people don't have what they say they want in life, and I'll just relate this to singers. But you could pretty much categorize this across the board. They don't have what they say they want in life because of the story they keep telling themselves and others about why they can't have it. Now, some things are just not obtainable. I understand that. Attainable, I should say. Yeah. They're not. Yeah. But if somebody else has done something in the area that you have expertise in, at the bare minimum, the path has been set. It may not be your path. It may not be the right way to go. But I don't abide to people saying, oh, no, I'm not going to bother about that because my friend that I was on the gig with on the weekend said, you know, record companies aren't signing anybody. Well, they're signing people every day. To what value is a whole different conversation. Yeah. But, you know, I say to people, you have the power until you sign something. Yeah. Totally. Right up until then, it's a conversation, right? It's like nothing more than, I might go with this management. Nah, I decided not to. If you have the power to say no to anybody about anything, certainly in this country, it may not be true in other parts of the world, but certainly here, you say, you know, hey, that's not going to work for me, you know? Yeah.
All right. Well, we could definitely go on for another 2 hours.
We could.
But, that might have to be a part 2.
Anytime. Mate, thank you so much for having me on. You know, I love you with all my heart, and you have been a great mentor to me and also to my son as well, and I really appreciate that. And what I said earlier, I mean, when the doubt's been in my head about, gee, I thought this was going pretty good, you are one of the people that I come to, because I know you're going to give me an honest answer, and you're going to do it lovingly as well, you know? And
thank you, mate.
And we're going to have a laugh in the process of it as well, which we always do. So,
absolutely,
mate, I every success with this idea. It's a great idea of what you're doing here and talking to people, and I hope that your listeners and viewers got something out of this today. I certainly did. So I'm sure. I hope that's the case.
I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will. And if they don't, fuck them.
Well put.
They wouldn't have got to this bit anyway.
That's funny, man.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, pal.